Okay, hello everyone. Today is our second lesson in IGCSE numbers. We are just learning on fraction operations and about decimals and conversions. Okay, so let's move into the first part about the decimals and conversions. Okay, so here there are some fractional numbers, right? We have 1 over 10, 1 over 100, and 1 over 1,000, right? Okay. And here we can find maybe here's another name for them that is tens, hundreds, and thousands. Okay. So for each part, we can start like we put 1/10 times 3, like here, like this, okay? So we can say we have 3 times 1/10. For each 1/10, we knew that is maybe a part in 10 parts, right? So we knew that we can also translate into the decimal places like 0.1, right? That means total part is 1 and 1/10 of this is 0.1, okay? So here you can find maybe for 0.375, you can find there are 3 decimal places, right? One is 3, another is 7, and the last is 5, right? So you can say, oh, maybe here you can write down as 375 divided by 1,000, because 1,000 also has 3 zero after this, okay? So here you can also like simplify, like using like last lesson we learned about decimal places and fraction numbers, and we knew that we can just divide them maybe by 25 at the same time. So it becomes 15 over 40, okay? And then you can also divide it by 5 and it becomes 3 over 8, okay? The answer also equals to 0.375, okay? So now we knew how to translate between the maybe decimals and for the fraction numbers, right? First, we can just find how many zeros after the 1, right? And we can find, oh, maybe here there are maybe for like 3 decimal places is 1 over 1,000, right? And then you can just put like just 375 onto the top of the fraction numbers, okay? So here you can find, maybe also you can use in the short division like 3 over 8. You can written after 3, there are 3 zeros, right? And then you can just written down, here we need 3 times 8 is 24. And then we have 6 and 0. And it's 7 times 8 equals to 56. And it's 40. 40 here. 5 times 8 equals to 40. Okay. So in different countries, yeah, we have different maybe divided mode method. Okay, so whatever method you are using, but please remember that you have to use the numbers to have division, and they can also translate it into the decimal places like this. Okay, so we can say 3 divided by 8 also equals to decimal places 0.375. Okay. So here you can just make it a maybe short memory for this, like a hard equals to 0.5. You have to remember this because they are very normally happen in IGCSE past papers. Okay, 1/4 equals to 0.25 and 3/4 equals to 0.75. Okay, and also we have fifths, eighths, and thirds. Okay, they are very interesting, but you can find thirds are very different from 1 over 2, or 1 over 5, or 1 over 8, right? You'll find that they are recurring numbers or recurring decimal places after the 0, right? Because 1/3 is 0.333 and 2 over 3, that is 0 point recurring 6, right? Okay, they are very interesting. So there are some very interesting, also some very interesting problems in GCSE past papers. We have to know that there are the comparison between different decimal places, or we can also say comparison between different numbers. Like here we have maybe for 5 over 8 and 0.65 and 3 over 5, we can just write them down into the numbers. Like here we have 0.6 and 0.265 and 0.650, okay? And if you have maybe some fraction numbers like 5 over 8 and 0.65 and 3 over 5, you can first translate into this order. You can say, oh, maybe for 5 over 8, there are decimal places like 0.6, and for 0.625 and 0.65 is here. And for 3 over 5, you can write it down as 0.6. Okay. So you can just compare with them between different decimal places. Like first, you can find all the decimal places is 6, okay? And the second decimal places here is 2, here's 5, and here's 0, right? So we knew that the second number is bigger than the first number because 5 is bigger than 2, right? And the first number also is bigger than the third number because 2 is bigger than 0, okay? So here you can just write it down in this order. Like 0.65 is bigger than 0.625 and bigger than 0.6, okay? And then you can just trace it back to become the fraction number and maybe for the decimal places at their original part, right? And you can maybe write there is a comparison with each other, okay? So there are some practice, you can just try to do this. I guess it's not very difficult for you, okay? So again, you give you some seconds to finish the problem, okay? Okay, so if you don't finish your homework, don't worry about this. You can just pause the video. Okay, so let's go on this together. Okay, so for the first problem is write 0.64 as a fraction in its simplest form, right? So we have just introduced you at the very first beginning. We knew that 0.64, there are two decimal places, right? So we have to write it down 64 over 100 because in 100 there are also two zeros after one, right? And then you can just divide it by 4 together, right? So 60 divided by 4 equals to 16, right? And for 100 divided by 4 is 25. So we can just write it down as 16 over 25 as the simplest form. And 7 over 20, we can want to write it down in decimal places. So first, we can just write it down in the division like this. Also, you can call it in your, sorry, okay, there's a phone call, but I felt rejected, okay? Sorry for that. Okay. And for 7 over 20, we can just write it down like this way. And first, we can write down 0 on the top of this because for 7 over 20, there's no zeros. Okay. And then after 7, you can add a 0. And then you can write down 3 and it's 60. And here is 10 left. And then write down a 0 after 10. So here is 0.35. Okay. So we can say here, for this is 0.35 as the decimal places. Okay. And the third problem is like to compare which is larger, like 4 over 5 or 0.85, right? And we knew that we have to compare this first, the most simplest ways to first translate into the decimal places, right? So for 4 over 5, we can write it down like this, 4 over 5, and you can calculate this is 0.8, right? So you have to compare with between 0.8 with 0.85. So we knew that 0.85 is bigger than 0.8, right? Okay, and for the fourth question, also to translate them into different decimals, right? So over here is 0.03 and here's 0.75. And first to be compare the first decimal places, right? Is 7, 7, okay, and 0, 0, right? So we knew that 7 over 100 is the smallest number in these three numbers, right? And then to compare the second letter, the second decimal places here is 0 and here's 5. So 0.7 is smaller than 0.75 and is 3 over 4, right? This is a comparison between them. And the previous question is to calculate 0.2 and 0.3. And here's a hint. You can find first calculate 2 times 3, and we knew that 2 times 3 equals to 6. And there's two zeros before the numbers. So we can just write down 6 like this, and then write down 0.06 like this way. Okay. We can just write down this way, and we can know what is the answer for this. So I hope you can just make some other practice after this lesson because there are a lot of comparison problems in the past papers. Okay, they are very important. Okay, so that's for all today's lesson. So see you next time. Bye.